Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to Political Insider. I'm Brett Smith, your humble host. Joining me today is the president of Right Turn Strategies, frequent guest on Kennedy Nation on Fox Business Network and Waters World on Fox News Channel. Chris Barron, welcome back, brother.
Glad to be back.
So your new op-ed, which can be found at thepoliticalinsider.com and only at thepoliticalinsider.com, is "The Biden Presidency is an Unmitigated Disaster." So let me do my best SE Cup imitation. I'll play devil's advocate. How in the world is Biden's presidency already a disaster? We've only been here for 5 months, Chris. How bad can it really be?
Well, that's what I was thinking to myself. After 5 months, how could it really be this bad? But the fact is, it has been a series of unfolding crises that have been not only mismanaged by this president, but most of these crises you can lay at the foot of this president. Look, a lot of times things happen that are beyond the control of the president of the United States. Look, the president's incredible, the most powerful man in the world. But there are still things beyond his or her control. And so I would be willing to give Biden a pass on some of this if so much of this wasn't self-inflicted. Look no further than the first crises that we were facing, the crisis on the border. Under President Trump, we had some of the lowest crossing rates in decades and decades and decades. In fact, Democrats were using it as the justification for us not finishing building the wall, not spending more money on enforcement, because they were saying, look, this is at record low crossings now. Now, here we are, barely into the Biden administration. And as soon as the media said that Biden had won, illegals started the march to the border because Biden's rhetoric had made it clear that he planned on undoing everything Trump had done to strengthen this border. He invited this disaster, and then bad enough to invite it, to create this disaster, but then to sit there and pretend like nothing's happening. I mean, they have played this semantics game over and over again, and not just on this. They've done it on issue after issue, where instead of actually offering substantive policy, like here's what we're going to do, instead they're playing games with words. For months now, we've been having this debate about whether it actually is a crisis or not. And this is just how unserious this White House is.
Yeah. So, and how many videos have we seen from news outlets on the border interviewing illegal aliens who we can't call illegal aliens anymore. They're migrant workers, even though migrant means that they return home, like migrant birds. They go back. These people never go back. They're here for good. But how many interviews have we seen where they ask somebody at the border, why are you coming? And they say, because Joe Biden told me that I could come, or that I should come, or now's the time.
Of course. I mean, look, Trump made stopping illegal immigration his signature campaign issue in 2016. If you ask people, like, what was Trump about in 2016? Like they're going to say, build a wall. He said he's going to build a wall. Yeah. And Biden had made it clear during the Democratic primaries and during the general election that he would do everything he could to unwind Trump's efforts on the border. Mm-hmm. This is the clearest signal to anyone thinking about coming that if you want to come, the time to do it is now. The time to do it is now. And again, look, it's bad enough to create this crisis. That's almost unforgivable in and of itself. But then you expect the president of the United States to say, like, okay, well, I acknowledge that something's happening, and here's what we're going to do to make this situation better. They refuse to do it. I mean, he appoints Kamala Harris the immigration czar, and she hasn't even gone to the border yet. I mean, this again, I keep saying unserious. This is not a serious administration. I mean, they're doing serious damage, but these are not people who are taking the challenges facing this country seriously, and they're not offering serious policy responses, and that is just unforgivable.
Yeah, it's the Oval Office is like the kids' table. There's no adults in the room running things whatsoever. Reminds me a lot of the Obama years, only worse, frankly.
No, see, I would. This is where I disagree with you. It doesn't remind me of the Obama years because I felt like I disagreed with what Obama was doing, but I felt like that he actually had a plan. I don't think this president has a plan. I mean, look, again, and I've talked about this before. The central campaign promise he made was, I hate Trump. His entire coalition was made up of disparate factions who only agreed on hate bad orange man. There was no plan there. And like the proverbial dog who catches the car, they don't know what to do now. They're in charge. You're in charge. You're president of the United States. We've got a crisis at the border. What the hell are you going to do about it? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to send out Jen Psaki to make the argument that we don't actually have a crisis. You know, I mean, by the way, this is the exact same thing they've done on jobs and on inflation. Look, the job numbers, we were expecting 1 million jobs to be added. This economy has been absolutely buzzing in the last few months. Expected that, look, everybody's opening up again. Like, this is going to be great. We're going to have huge job numbers. Instead, job numbers are way, 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 way off. And Biden comes out and says, this is proof that what we're doing is working. No, it's not. This is literally, who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes? Like, you've got the jobs numbers there. You have what expectations were. You see how unbelievably far you missed on expectation. You can't then tell me this is proof that what we're doing is working. This is proof that what you're doing isn't working. And they did the same thing on inflation. We've got the highest inflation numbers since 2008. And they're sitting there and telling us that there's no proof that there's inflation. There is. I mean, you can only deny this for so long.
Yeah, I mean, I would even say that the $1.80 jump in gas, which is what we've seen in Arizona, we went from $1.85 under Trump to now about $2.80 under Biden. That's a tax. That's a tax on the middle class. That's going to drive up. I think that is a when it comes to inflation, that's not helping things, because it's like Jimmy Hoffa famously once said, if you got it, it came on a truck. Everything comes on a truck. Even your Amazon stuff, it comes on a truck, a bigger truck. Then it goes to a smaller truck when it comes to your house. But everything comes on a truck. And the cost of fuel is driving everything up, along with the fact that employers can't find employees to come back to work because they're too fat, dumb, and happy sitting at home collecting unemployment.
And look, I don't begrudge people. I got in this argument with somebody this weekend where I said, look, if I was unemployed and they were offering me more money to be unemployed than it was for me to go back to my crappy job, I sure as hell would stay at home and be unemployed. I don't begrudge people making that decision. I begrudge policymakers who made the decision to incentivize people sitting on their butts at home. Like, of course, people are going to do what is in their financial best interest. And if it's in their financial best interest to stay at home and not work, of course, that's what they're going to do. And again, it is outrageous. We've seen report after report where small business owners are saying, especially folks in the service industry, bars, restaurants, like hotel, they can't find the employees to come back. They can't find the employees to come back. This is not like hypothetically, like this could happen. This is what has happened. And again, the Biden administration will not accept responsibility. It is one thing to create a problem. It is another thing to simply refuse to then deal with the problem that you have created. And that's what the Biden administration continues to do.
Yeah, they don't it's kind of like 12 steppers. The first step is acknowledging that you're an alcoholic, that you have a problem. A Biden administration can't even acknowledge they have a problem.
And where do all our fact checkers go? They're claiming there's not a crisis at the border. Where our fact checkers say, well, actually, we've got the highest border crossing rates that we've seen in 20 years. Like, where are when they say, actually, there's no inflation? We actually have numbers to show there's inflation. Like, where the fact checkers saying the Biden administration is lying to you again? When they say, like, actually, our policies aren't resulting in more people staying at home rather than coming to work. Where are the people say, like, hey, actually, no, that's not true? I mean, again, didn't
Biden say that they're not seeing information, to correlate with that as far as people staying home because they're being paid through unemployment? He's like, oh, our numbers aren't showing that.
Yeah, I mean, basically, literally every single go to any city in the entire country, small or large, and go and ask like people like who run restaurants, who run bars, who run hotels. Ask them like, are you having trouble having people come back? The answer is absolutely yes. I mean, every local news station is doing these stories of the local business owners who can't get people to come back. And the Biden administration, again, it's just pure like we don't see it.
Well, even my governor, Doug Ducey, who Trump rightfully calls the second worst Republican governor in Arizona, he's offering $2,000 bonus checks for people who get a job. I mean, that's how desperate we are at this point to get people back into the workforce, is we're giving them bonuses of $2,000. Forget the $1,400 stimulus check.
We incentivize people staying at home. I mean, this is the craziness behind this. Look, it was one thing back at last April when we had this shutdown of the entire economy. Like, it was the right thing to do to step up and help people who were hurting due to no fault of their own. However, now we've got an economy that's opened up. We should not be incentivizing people to stay at home anymore. And we should. I mean, no offense to your governor, but you talk about it, taking it, coming and going. Like, the Biden administration is going to pay you to stay at home, and then your governor is going to pay you to get a job. Like, I mean, this is like the lunacy of these policies. They're running completely counter to each other.
Yeah, it's complete lunacy. So we've basically got in the first 5 months, we got border crisis, gas energy crisis, a Middle East disaster, the economy struggling despite opening up, and we've got inflation rearing up. Are we seeing 70s style stagflation? And that's a word that I encourage all of our viewers to Google and do some research on, which is the Carter era stagflation, which means a lot of money circulating in the system, chasing way too few goods.
And not just that, but usually we see when we have like high growth, jobs growth, that's when we're also and wages increase. That's when we tend to see increase also in inflation, because obviously more people making more money have the ability to buy more stuff. So then the market follows it. There's tend to go with stagflation. What we saw this divergence where we actually saw rising inflation, while at the same time we saw the job market closing up and wages actually decreasing. It takes a special kind of I effed this up president to pull off stagflation. This isn't something you can just easily do. I mean, you really have to work at this. These are market forces that don't normally want to be tied to each other. Look, because usually if you're seeing rising inflation, it means it's because you've got rising wages. Like the idea that you're having these two disastrous polar opposites pulling at the same time is an unbelievable disaster for the economy. And that's what we saw at the end of the 70s. And once you hit that tailspin, as Carter found out, it is incredibly difficult to dig your way out of it. And the problem for Biden, which the same problem for Carter, was the government can't dig its way out by spending more money. In fact, that makes things worse. The government spending more money only increases inflationary concerns. So it's this downward spiral that you can't stop. And look, we're still early on in this. There's an opportunity for us to recognize, hey, we got to pump the brakes here. Look, we need to recognize that we can't continue to incentivize people to stay at home. We have to have people going back to work. People going back to work is going to be helpful. We can't have policies that are going to, increase inflation. We can't have energy policies that are going to make energy scarcer. As we've talked about before, that's kind of one of those building blocks. Everything has got the price of gas built into it. The moment the price of gas starts to go up, that's not just impacting folks who are driving for Memorial Day. That's impacting the cost of every single thing you see in the grocery store, every single thing you see, at the mall. Like, it impacts the price of everything that you buy. That is, the price of gas is factored into almost everything in our lives, and that's what people don't understand. That's why rising gas prices are so dangerous over the long haul, because they can put us in one of those inflationary, spins.
Yeah, I mean, it's why Trump was so adamant about making us energy independent and driving the cost of the price per barrel of crude down to about $40 a barrel, and now we're up to about 60, 70 at this point. So Trump understood that cheap gas means cheaper goods, and which is a huge tax cut for the middle class. It's a huge tax cut for everyone, but it's probably felt more by the middle class. And that's why we were thriving under Trump, because Trump understood that oil is the lifeblood. And I think Rush Limbaugh said this a long time ago. He said oil is the lifeblood of the world economy. I even remember Bill Buckley, like back in the 90s, saying, somebody asked him, should we go to war for oil? And he said, well, why not? He said it's just the lifeblood. It's just what helps circulate goods and services and manufacturing. I mean, there's not anything that doesn't have petroleum in it.
By the way, this is nothing new. I mean,
right.
Look, the Nazis in World War II were, their empire ambitions were destroyed, yes, by the blood, sweat, and tears of brave men and women of many countries. In large part, it was fueled by their lack of fuel.
They ran out of gas. Yeah.
Yes. Over and over again, it happened. It's what inspired their Africa and Middle Eastern dreams. It's why Hitler was cozying up to radical Islamic elements. Then they were dependent upon it, and they ran out over and over again. And
MacArthur
yes.
as well. That's how he defeated or helped defeat Japan. Was he choked off the supply lines down in Australia and Malaysia, food, water, gas, ammo. He didn't have the troops to fight, but he knew that if he choked off the supply lines, that would end everything.
And by the way, every time that gas goes up, it empowers the people on this planet who are some of our largest enemies. It empowers the Iranian mullahs. It empowers Saudi Arabia. It empowers some of the folks who have been fundamentally anti-Western and fundamentally opposed to everything that this country, is founded on. And, it's why you look at the rising, violence in the Middle East. And again, the weakness of this administration is not just domestic weakness. I made the case in my article. The reason why you see Hamas deciding now to act for the first time in years, the reason why you're seeing the kind of brazen, cyber terrorist attack like we had on the pipeline, an unprecedented attack, is because there's a sense all across the globe that our enemies are sensing weakness. It's not just weakness when it comes to the domestic economy. It's weakness on the international stage. And this administration has done absolutely nothing to change that narrative. I mean, look at the way that they handled the pipeline shutdown. I mean, I can't imagine. Could you imagine what if that would have happened when Trump was president? Trump would be saying, look, we know that you're in Russia and you're all going to wake up disappeared tomorrow if this shit's not back on. End of story. We're certainly not paying any ransom of $5 million. And instead, that's exactly what happened. We went from this country doesn't negotiate to terrorists to, you might as well pay the ransom. There's nothing we can do about it. And by the way, this is Joe Biden, who's going to be Mr. Tough on Russia. We know that the cyber terrorist attack came from Russia. I appreciate that now all of a sudden the administration trusts the word of Vladimir Putin when Putin says that the Kremlin had nothing to do with it. The truth is we know that nothing happens on that scale in Russia that Vladimir Putin doesn't have some idea about. And if you think that Putin wasn't happy that the United States economy was crippled and that Biden was humiliated on the international stage, then you're absolutely insane. Of course he was. Anything that happens bad to this country is good for Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, that was a real demonstration in weakness. And I just kept thinking to myself, okay, so they hacked a pipeline for a week, which crippled our economy and sent gas prices up to $7, $10. Certain areas of Virginia and the East Coast are completely out of gas. What's next? The power grid? Can we expect someone to hack the power grid and shut down certain portions of America for ransom at this point? Because we just
Well, yes,
demonstrated that we'll pay them off.
we'll pay you. We'll pay you. I mean, this, like, you might as well have chummed the water. I mean,
Yeah.
so now these dark side folks have written the playbook for cyber terrorists all across the country. Hey, this is the way you do it.
Yeah.
You want to get a fat paycheck, from a U.S. corporation. Here's how you do it. And by the way, the downside to that is nothing. I mean,
yeah.
What was the Biden administration done to track these people down? Again, they know that this cyber attack originated in Russia, and nothing else has happened.
Well, I mean, they're not even talking about going after or to fortify the security on the pipeline so this doesn't happen again. What are they doing to fortify the security on the grid so this doesn't happen again? There's no updates. There's no offense. It's just, that's a private company and we'll let them figure that out. That's what we got.
They're too busy trying to figure out how to, subsidize electric cars.
Right.
I mean, and again, Joe Biden's in Michigan today at a Ford plant to talk about electric cars. I mean, you talk about fiddling while Rome burns. Man, I heard this morning, there's something like 90% of gas stations in the District of Columbia still don't have gas.
Right.
And Sleepy Joe's up in Detroit talking about plug-in cars. What the hell are you doing, man? People can't even get gas within driving distance of the White House. And you're up talking about electric cars. How about you figure out a way to make sure that our energy, that our energy in this country is protected?
Well, and let's just say, for the sake of argument, that everybody had an electric car. Where does the power come from to generate the electricity to charge everyone's electric car?
Like you can't ask for a rational these things are these, like, they're cul-de-sacs, they're intellectual cul-de-sacs.
Yeah,
they all come back to the same place. The truth is it doesn't matter whether or not we're using electric cars, or whether or not we've got this low carbon emission, that thing. The truth is that we're still reliant as a globe on fossil fuels. I'd love that for them to make an announcement tomorrow that we have figured out something that is a viable replacement to fossil fuels, because in my estimation, it would render the Middle East a completely useless pile of dirt. And they could all go back to living in caves and stop having so much power on the global stage. But we're not there yet.
Yeah.
When we can't wish our way there, and we can't allow our country to face unbelievable decline as a result of this wishing that reality weren't the way that it were. It's fine. Yeah. One day, I hope that we're going to be able to get off of fossil fuels, but we're not there, and we're not even close to being there.
Not even close. And I don't believe that the transition from fossil fuels is going to be electric anyway. I've never believed that. I think it's going to be something like fusion or something that people aren't even, that hasn't even been discovered yet, but it's not going to be electricity.
Well, look, I mean, every one of the great technological advances were things that couldn't really be predicted.
Yeah.
Like when, I think back to, there was a time in this country where, everything was horse driven, and people were building these giant canals all over the country to move large amounts of goods. It's like the C&O Canal that was supposed to connect DC to Ohio. Mm-hmm. By the time, they never finished the canal, because by the time that they were done working on it, would have been invented? Trains.
Right.
Trains got invented, and all of a sudden it's we don't need canals. This is an incredible waste of time. Okay, well, guess what? The thing that came after trains was the automobile. Again, these are these giant technological advances that render the previous technology completely and totally obsolete. And you're right, it's not going to be the electric car. That's it is going to be one of those things like fusion or something like that. Like much smarter people than me know about, that is going to fundamentally change the way that we power everything on this planet. And it's probably something we can't even comprehend at this moment. But you can't wish away the reality of the situation that we're facing, and that is that fossil fuels are king, and that we can't function as a society without them.
Yeah. Whatever we transition to, whatever the next new widget that powers the world, I just hope that it incorporates flying cars so we can finally see Blade Runner, kind of start to come to life. Wouldn't that be cool? Well,
Blade Runner, I want the Jetsons.
maybe not the dystopia.
Flying cars, like I know, like this is like that. Like probably flying cars and robot maids, and
yes.
Great.
I mean, and I'm sorry, but Ramba is not.
Doesn't count, man.
Doesn't count. That's not the same. Okay. What was your name? Rosie?
Yes.
A place for everything and everything in its place. That's what I want. And I need her to cook as well. That would be really helpful. So, hey, another interesting thing you say in your piece was you don't want to be a part of a quote unquote resistance movement like Trump dealt with. So what do you say to people who argue that we have an obligation to oppose Biden's radicalism?
You can oppose policies.
Mm-hmm.
You should not want the president of the United States to fail. This is fundamentally, this is something where I don't get it. I mean, this is like being on a plane and not liking the pilot, so hoping he crashes. Like, like nothing good comes about it. I don't want inflation. I don't want stagflation. I don't want to see people losing their jobs and losing their homes. I don't want to see rising violence in the Middle East. I want this president to be successful. I have limited expectations about what that success could look like, but I'm not going to wish him ill. I'm not going to say, look, the resist folks to Trump had nothing positive to offer. They didn't want to try to work with Trump to find middle ground that folks could agree on. They wanted to oppose this president at every turn. It's one of the reasons why we never got an infrastructure deal after Democrats took the House, is because they were committed to not giving this president a win. That didn't improve anybody's bridges or roads. That didn't create jobs in this country. That didn't make us didn't protect our infrastructure for the next 100 years. They were just committed to stopping Trump, and I don't want to be that person. I don't think that's patriotic. I don't think that it makes a whole lot of sense, and to me, it feels a little juvenile. I'm resisting this president. Like,
right.
So what? Like
the resist movement, and I live in a college town, so I see over the last 5-6 years, see a lot of resist stickers on Priuses and Teslas. It's amazing. People buy a $40,000-$50,000 car and they put a cheap paper sticker on the bumper, which you can never get off. Just blows my mind. But that movement was really driven by hate. Personal 100%. Hate and animosity towards Trump. It really didn't have anything to do with his policies, because if you tried to talk to those resist people, they don't know jack about his policies. They just know that orange man bad. And I'm with you, man. I don't want to see our side stoop to that, because I think we're better than that. And I just don't think it's necessary.
Also, don't hate Biden. I hate Biden's policy. I don't hate Biden. Yeah. I hate what his policies are doing, but I just these people who spent 4 years just consumed with anger at everything that Trump did. It's so fundamentally unhealthy. That's not how you should live your life. That's a mental disorder.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it's not help. And I don't want to be one of those people. This is still the greatest country on the entire planet. I'm super proud to be an American, and I can disagree with the president. I can disagree with his policies, and I can do so strongly. I don't have to stoop to the point of saying I hate that man and spend all of my time consumed with hating him. I'm going to spend my time figuring out how do we make the best of a bad situation with Biden as president? And how do we end up flipping the House and Senate in 2022? And how do we make sure that we have a Republican back in the White House in 2024? I just don't feel that same kind of anger that the other side was consumed with.
Yeah, I didn't even have that under Obama. And, at the time I did agree with Rush that I hoped Obama failed because I disagree with his policies. Rush's caveat was, I want America to succeed, but it's impossible under these policies. And it's kind of like with Biden. I don't know if you remember, but I think it was the LA Times wrote an article right after Biden was inaugurated, and it said, okay, now that Joe Biden's back, we need to focus on getting the economy back to what it was in 2019 pre-COVID. And it was this sort of veiled compliment towards Trump. I mean, if it was so great in 2019, we need to get back to it. Well, then it must have been awesome. But the problem here is that even if Joe Biden wanted to do that, even if he came out and said, I want to bring the economy back to 2019, what we know, he doesn't know how. That's the problem.
Right, but still, look, I mean, here's the thing. If the Biden White House came out with a proposal, I don't care what the issue is. If the Biden White House came out with a proposal that made sense, that even if it wasn't, it's not going to be a proposal Trump would make. I know that. We have Biden in the White House, but if he came out with a proposal that made sense, I wouldn't oppose it out of hand just because it came from Joe Biden. And that's my point in this. Is it I'm willing to look at what Biden proposed. I'm not just going to say I'm against it because Biden proposed it. The Democrats said they were against stuff just because Trump was for it.
Absolutely.
It didn't matter. If Trump was for it, they were against it. It's why all of a sudden the Democratic Party is the party of endless war, because Trump was against sending our brave men and women to die in pointless wars. So now the Bill Kristols and David Frums of the world are Democrats, and Democrats are willing to sell their soul out to neocons because they hated Trump so much. I'm not willing to do that. I'm not Biden said he wanted that he wanted to bring troops home from Afghanistan on September 11th. I said it should be earlier than that. We should be following Trump's plan. But I'm still happy the troops are coming home. So I'm not going to writing op-ed saying we should leave the troops in Afghanistan just because I hate Biden. No, that's silly. That's silly. And again, if he came forward with an infrastructure plan that actually prioritized real infrastructure, that actually prioritized our roads and our bridges and our airports and real infrastructure, I would we ought to be talking. We ought to be trying to figure out how do we find that common ground. I'm not going to listen to daycare proposals and infrastructure. I'm not going to entertain foolishness, but we should be willing to have serious conversations about policy issues. We have an obligation to have those issues. And if the Biden White House wants to put out foolishness, then we can. It's very easy to say no. I'm against it, but I'm still willing to listen if they're willing to offer real serious policy.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good clarification because we can't find ourselves as in the MAGA movement or in the America First movement falling into the abyss, which is the resistance movement. Those people are nuts and they're still crazy. And it's almost kind of like they were crazy going in and then Trump made them even more crazy. I mean, you just look at people like Kathy Griffin and others. He drove their madness because they were kind of crazy to begin with. And I don't want to see our side sort of devolve into just Biden man bad, just like Orange man bad.
And not just that, one of the reasons why the Biden administration has been a policy failure is because they didn't have any policy plans, because it was completely motivated. Their whole campaign was about hating Trump. Trump's campaigns, both in 2016 and in 2020, were policy, oriented stuff. It's why the MAGA base would get mad whenever Trump would say something that didn't jive with what he promised us, because we weren't just blindly following Trump. There was stuff he promised us that we weren't getting. If Trump had come out, remember when there was this talk early on in the Trump administration about intervening in Syria, and we were all like, "Hey, no. We did not sign up for this."
Right.
But, we're not for a ground war in Syria like that. That's why we voted for you, man. So Trump pulled back. Whenever there would be talk of Jared Kushner was floating this immigration compromise or whatever, the base would come out hard. Because that's not what we voted for, man. We were motivated by policy specific issues. Yes, Trump was a personality that elevated those issues, but we all were like, hey, we want there to be better trade deals. We're tired of being walked on by our allies and trading partners. We want the Europeans and our allies to pay their fair share when it comes to their defense. We're done with these endless wars. We want to clamp down on illegal immigration. There were these specific policy things that brought all of us together as a movement that were the guiding lights for Trump as president. The Biden coalition has none of that. Their whole thing was vanquished bad orange man. So now the bad orange man is gone, and they're like, well, what the hell do we do now?
Well, and they think, it's funny because Make America Great Again, had so many policy issues, and a lot of them you just talked about. Build Back Better is just a slogan. There is no policy to that. There's no substance. It means nothing. It's basically alliteration for the sake of alliteration, and in my opinion, it's a really bad tagline. Whatever PR marketing firm that came up with that is sad.
Well, and what's so funny is, so when Jimmy Carter won, essentially he got to DC, and the powers that be in DC were like, Jimmy Carter promised he was going to come, he was going to change the way Washington worked, and the establishment laughed and said, we'll be here long after you're gone. And Carter was a complete and total disaster, and the establishment just laughed him back out of town. I read an article in Politico today. The Biden administration has been talking about raising all these taxes on businesses, raising the corporate income tax, raising capital gains, like all this stuff that would be a total nightmare for big business. And all of these CEOs are they don't think that any of this stuff is going to happen. They don't take him seriously, he is not a credible person. That's so embarrassing. If I were president and I read an article where essentially big business is laughing at me because they don't think any of my proposals are serious and have any traction or possibility of happening, I'd be so ticked off.
He probably doesn't even know.
I know.
I guarantee that article has not been put in front of his face. It's funny. I compared Obama to Carter quite a bit, but I don't think that's a fair comparison at this point. I think Joe Biden is the second coming of Jimmy Carter. I don't know what Obama was at this point, but I do know that Joe is looking a lot like Jimmy Carter.
Well, and look, I give Obama more credit than I think some on our side are willing to do, because some of the things that he did set in motion things that are going to happen beyond our control. Obamacare, perfect example. Obamacare is destined to fail, and the plan was for Obamacare to fail from the beginning. So that your options would be that we have government takeover of healthcare, or we kick all these people off of their plans and we go to a free market. Look, you can't give people healthcare. You can't give people protections against things like pre-existing conditions. You can't allow people to keep their kids on their policies for as long and then kick them off. It's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. So the Obama was actually incredibly smart. Of course, he learned the lesson from Hillary. That you can't. The moment you throw socialized medicine out there, it's going to go down in flames. So instead, Obama built this plan that was lacking one component, the most important component, cost containment. And without it, this was always going to fail, but it would make a lot of people even more people reliant on the government for their health care. At the same time, where all these Democratic governors and progressives are pushing in states to expand Medicare to include even more people. So you've got more and more people rely on the government, and you've got this Obamacare system that is destined to fail. The option at the end, I'm telling you right now, we're heading towards government-run healthcare, and sadly, I think there's nothing we can do about it. I'm almost tired of fighting over it. It's not that I don't care about healthcare; it's that the time for us to have effectively fought against it was 15 years ago. It's almost a fait accompli now. We're not going to kick people off of. We're not going to take people's healthcare away from them. No one is. It's not going to happen. Pre-existing conditions aren't going away. We're not kicking people off of their healthcare. All these other things are Band-Aids. We had a choice about whether or not we were going to have a serious free market approach that would have allowed people to own their own healthcare, that they could move across state lines, take from employer to employer. We chose not to go that route. Yeah. Obama got his wish with Obamacare, and it's a done deal. Obama was, look, I disagree with him, but he was smart. He knew what he was doing. He knew the direction the dominoes were pushing. Biden's incompetent. He's being pushed around by other people and told what to do, and none of this stuff is heading in one direction. He's not being taken seriously,
I don't see how he moves any of this stuff. Obviously, I can see him moving it through the House. I don't know how any of this stuff gets through the Senate. I don't know how any of it does. None of it.
Well,
not unless Mitch McConnell is willing to play ball. But he said, as far as infrastructure, he said we don't want to open up those 2017 tax cuts.
They're gonna use reconciliation again.
You think so?
Yeah, they're gonna use reconciliation again.
Yeah.
Look, that essentially Schumer has decided that he can get a second bite of the apple with reconciliation this year, even though you're only supposed to use reconciliation once. And they're going to try to use reconciliation. And the question is whether or not there'll be enough political pushback to prevent that kind of power, that kind of naked power grab. A lot of talk about the blowing up the filibuster. You don't have to blow up the filibuster if you can figure out a way to worm your way into using reconciliation whenever you want it. Then the filibuster's gone.
Filibuster was completely and totally useless when it came to Obamacare. I stayed up for that 4 a.m. vote. I watched the whole thing, and
also we lied to people.
Oh yeah,
we told them that we could stop it. We couldn't. It was a fait accompli. It was done. They knew they had the votes. It's one of those things that I think you want to talk about laying the seeds for Trump. Like that was one of those moments. That was one of those moments where we were told that we could do it, and they knew we never could. And so
one vote. It was one vote away.
Yeah, but we knew they had the votes. You know what I mean? Like it was just those. The establishment in Washington constantly made wrote checks that their behinds couldn't cash, and that was that was one of those examples where I felt that kind of like disappointment throughout the movement on that night, and I thought there's gonna be a reckoning at some point. They can't keep giving people hope that things are going to change and then not delivering. And eventually there was a reckoning. It was called Donald J. Trump.
Yeah. I was referring to John McCain, where we had the opportunity with Obamacare, and one man blew it.
Oh yeah, with the Obamacare repeal. Yeah, we had the opportunity with McCain, but again, look.
There was real no plan to really replace it. There
wasn't. It was political suicide. In a way, McCain screwed us and saved us at the same time, because the Democrats would have liked nothing more. You think 2018 was bad? Imagine if Obamacare had been repealed and we had months and months and months of stories about people getting kicked off their health care because we had no replacement plan. And frankly, Trump didn't if you ask people what are the core issues Trump was running on after he got elected in 2016, Obamacare repeals, that was a Paul Ryan thing. And you remember, and Trump trusted Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell on that, and it was a fundamental mistake. He said, "I hope that Obamacare repeals waiting on my desk the day that I get sworn in," and because they had convinced him. Let's go with Obamacare repeal. Trump should have led with infrastructure. I wrote a whole column about this because he cared about infrastructure, and his people, the working class Americans, would have benefited from real infrastructure investments in this country. It would have put Trump voters to work. Instead, we have this farcical theater that ends up with McCain getting to give the ultimate finger to Trump in the thumbs down, a complete and total embarrassment to the White House early on, that all of a sudden, all of the political capital is spent on the tax cuts and a failed Obamacare repeal. And it's, again, it is one of the biggest lessons from the Trump presidency is we can't work with the Paul Ryans of the world. They're not interested in our agenda, and Trump should never have gone along with it.
Speaking of political capital, Biden's got precious political capital at this point. He's running out of time. I still think he's going to use all of his political capital on one big ticket item. Do you think it's HR1? Do you think it's infrastructure? What do you think? You know, Obama did it with Obamacare. That he spent all his political capital on that largely. What do you think? Right. Where do you see Biden going?
Well, the problem is, and this was the problem for Obama, all of those costs are zero-sum things because the progressive coalition is made up of all of these little like constituencies who all think their issue should be number one. Mm-hmm. So when Obama moved Obamacare, that was the expense of the environmental people who wanted cap and trade. Nancy Pelosi made all of her moderate House Democrats walk the plank on cap and trade, even though the Senate wasn't going anywhere. A ton of guys lost re-election because of that cap and trade vote. And it came at the expense of immigration. Again, people talk about like, oh, we need comprehensive immigration reform. Well, Obama had super majorities in the House and Senate. He could have passed immigration reform, but he spent it on Obamacare. Yeah. Same problem Biden is going to face. Whatever he decides to move on is going to be at the expense of all of these other constituencies. So if he decides, hey, you want to know what? I want to push infrastructure, then it's going to be at the expense of HR1, of the Equality Act, of immigration. It's going to be at the expense of all of these other issues.
Green New Deal,
like all of this stuff. Like he gets to make one constituency happy. And my guess is it's going to be infrastructure,
labor unions.
It's labor unions. It's a whole lot of businesses. It's a whole lot of special interests are going to be completely and totally happy with Biden spending a couple $1 trillion on infrastructure. But it's going to mean HR1 doesn't happen. The Equality Act doesn't happen. Immigration reform doesn't happen. Like all these things, which is all good for us. But then you get these mad constituencies who say we were promised. All we had to do was vote for Joe Biden.
How is that not good for our side too?
That's great, man. I'm not. It's not bad for anybody. I'm just saying.
I can't wait. That's what I'm looking forward to, man. Is once they drop the hammer on this bill, they're done until 2022, and that's when the circular firing squad happens.
Yep, and the finger point. And again, like if they put their political weight behind infrastructure, which I expect, and not behind HR1. The bloodbath in the Democratic Party is going to be intense.
Well, and HR1 has all basically nationalizing the elections. That's not in the infrastructure bill, is it?
No, HR1's not in.
Yeah, I mean HR1 is just pure nightmare fuel.
No, it's permanent majority for the Democratic Party. Like that's. Yeah. I mean, I guess if I was being Machiavellian, if I were Democrats, I think I'd put HR1 before everything else.
Hell yeah!
Permanent majority like legislation. Like, so what? I mean, infrastructure makes the lobbyists happy, and infrastructure makes a couple of your other little constituencies and labor unions happy. At the end of the day, man, the path to permanent majority for Democrats is the wild, wild west when it comes to voting, and that's exactly what HR1 does.
Yeah. I just don't think they're going to go there. I think he's going to go for infrastructure, but that's just
look. The establishment Democrats will be happy. And they'll have given lip service to HR1, and Nancy Pelosi will come out and say it's the Jim Crow racist Republicans. And the truth is it's going to have been the Biden administration. They'll have chosen to prioritize labor unions over their African-American and progressive base. And they can explain that to their folks in primaries.
They got a history of that though. I mean, that's really nothing new. They always throw everybody under the bus for the labor unions, and the great thing about Trump was that he was really eating into that labor union vote, and frankly, I think anybody who's MAGA or America First is going to eat into that vote. I just 100%. Do. 100%. So, all right. Well, anyway, we are out of time. I know you got to get back to work because you're a very busy guy. Chris, let everybody know your social media coordinates so where they can find you.
You can find me on Twitter at Chris R. Barron.
Cool. All right, and everyone, keep an eye out for Chris's new op-ed, which will drop Thursday or Friday. Always good stuff. Everyone, make sure and check out thepoliticalinsider.com and subscribe to our newsletter. Also, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Please like and share this video far and wide. Subscribe to the Political Insider channel on Rumble and YouTube so you never miss any of our new videos like this one. Until next time, keep the faith and stay frosty. Thanks, everybody.